And we're live. Daniel's here. Correctivity as applied to the war in Ukraine and the dynamics that have gone into its making. Let's get settled here. One says Lech Poznan all the way. Well, these when it comes to football, he's talking about a football team, Lech Poznan, I guess. When it comes to football, soccer, I do follow the national teams when they play with the people from their nation, as Italy and Poland do. League football is mercenary, so you don't have people necessarily from the particular town, not even necessarily from the nation of the town. So it loses its appeal for me. But on a national level, when the team is playing with their own men, I can root for them, even if it's not my nation. Hi, Amanda. Good evening. Good to see you there. Now then, I got an email from a friend in America who I knew years ago, in the early to mid 90s, in fact, in my days back in Amherst, Massachusetts. And well, he sent me, I recontacted him recently. He's not like me, he's always been a liberal. Perhaps a bit grudgingly, painfully, and it was in tandem with his being a Christian, so which was not an issue for me. I wasn't going to be a liberal for that or any other reason. But anyway, we eventually parted ways because I was, to say the least, politically incorrect there in Amherst, Massachusetts, doing my thing. But that's besides the point. But he was a good guy, and I contacted him recently. A little bit of background: I lent support to his wife in particular, who I met at 12-step meetings, and encouraged her to have a child with Jim, even though her therapist had tried to dissuade her from that. And I'll always feel good about that. So he came away with a daughter who's doing very well. Partly due to my help. But again, we had to part ways because America was just getting too much for me. It was, and well, Jim he understandably did not want to be associated with that kind of stigma. Anyway, but I did recontact him recently, and we've been having some civil discourse. He asked me, but he sent me this email after a bit of a hiatus. Very brief. The war in Ukraine is sapping my hope for the future. Are you seeing an influx of refugees from Ukraine in your area? How many people are here? And well, I answer. Hi, name. That's quite a statement. that to me should have a longer answer. I'll say this to begin. There has been no influx of refugees here in Western Poland's Poznan, where I am. Things could not be more placid than they are and always have been since I've been here. By the way, the pedestrian zone in the city center is something the civic engineering of America, based as it is on the car industry, does not provide social, psychological relief for. Very succinctly, and it's not, I thought I was going to write a short letter, but I did a Thomas Jefferson thing where I didn't have time to write a short letter, so this is going to take a few minutes to get through. I so burdened and burned out my capacity for worry and pessimism in my earlier life that I expect overwhelming perfidy regarding what I care most about, that is the homeostasis for European peoples. Now, I'm comfortable in speaking those terms with Jim because he's a scientist, what was he? He was a microwave engineer. Perfidy regarding what I care most about, homeostasis of European peoples, that an abstract formula has emerged for my development. That is a worldview that gives me hope that it may be pursued, even if it is not, and if not, I'll have done my part in outlining the idea that makes sense to me, apart from successfully marketing the idea, perhaps. In brief, I do see a way for liberation and homeostasis from the tangles and oppression of runaway imperialism versus the obstructive bureaucracy of nation states, which serve sociopaths, in a word, such as backs the mindset of those responsible on both sides of this war and prevents them from serving the broad human ecologies of ethne, their relations, and pervasive ecology more broadly. It calls for unions and coalitions thereupon of DNA-based nations, which can structure accountability, thus correctivity, thus homeostasis, among the ethne, that is the species, and coordination among the union of unions, that is the genus. My answer to those who obstruct my idea with the claim that DNA is not enough is that I do not make the claim that DNA is enough. In fact, see the realm of hermeneutics as preliminary. For a brief aside, there can be hermeneutics which misdirect the would-be homeostasis, and there could be hermeneutics which direct it to reconstruction and back to homeostasis. The hermeneutic postmodern turn was meant to take us back from otherworldly Cartesian estrangement in reaction to, let's call it, sophistry and stupidity, to provide for re-engagement and centering of accountability and homeostasis by centering caring relations of this sort, which Frank Salter would call ethnic genetic interests, and which the Aristotelian worldview would call praxis, and its management by phronesis, its political management. Aristotle saying that, in a sense, politics come first, or people come first, because if that's out of whack, then nothing else is going to matter, as you see. And it's managed by phronesis, which is structured practical judgment or working hypotheses, through a liberation from mere arbitrary tangles of mere facticity, through a liberation from the arbitrary tangles of mere facticity, as Heidegger would say, into which we are thrown. Destructive, no-account rigidities of scientism and natural fallacy, on the other hand, the empirical side of Cartesian estrangement, as it were. Okay. Bear with me, this isn't too much longer, and it's important. That should not be so controversial, but it is when taking on the obstruction to this solution to structure accountability and homeostasis. The obstruction for Westerners, European peoples, in doing this, what I call unionization and coalition building for good reason, has two key components, or one and 2A and 2B, 1 and 2. The two having a 2A and 2B. Number one, the YKW, their genetic patterns and elite niche occupation, which achieved greater overrepresentation, where not greater hegemony than ever, in at least 8 to 9 elite niches following the 2008 financial bailout. Those niches being religion, money, politics, media, academia, law and courts, international business and other NGOs, organized crime, and then spilling over into technology, including war technology. Now then, a huge important difference from the normal reaction to this, right-wing Cartesianism in search of unassailable foundations beyond the perfidy of YKW rhetoric, and there is that the Mossad do wage war by deception after all, and abuse of praxis, that is the necessary that realm of practical judgment which requires argumentation. Pure theory isn't going to do it by itself. In other words, is that this platform provides diagnosis for our European part in this, where our people are disingenuously or naively complicit. Thus, problems 2A and 2B, they can be 1A or 1B, and the YKW problem 2. The order is not all important so long as one recognizes a rupture or potential rupture of the boundaries and borders of homeostasis would be. 2A, right-wingers, including neocons and neoliberals, whose low-account objectivism, not to be confused with Randianism, is paid off and their elitism flattered with a quote, just the way it is, with quote, just the way it is arguments that allow them to abrogate accountability to the species system, human ecology, the limited social genetic capital, to accountability to the people from which they emerge. These right-wingers are relying on pseudo-objectivity to limit accountability to their people, to the union that we might have. 2B, liberals, those with a preponderant wish that bounds and borders be transgressed, operating on the same taken for granted low account objectivism as right-wingers, only the flattery of their more physical capacity as compared to the mental acumen of right-wingers, and the payoff for them is more in the manner of license and licentiousness. Of course, there are other problematic interfaces for would-be European homeostasis, such as black biopower and the right-wing imperialism of others, such as Chinese. But the YKW and our traitors, as it were, are the key starting points in the radar screen's survey for trying to get a bead on, track, and hold of systemic vulnerabilities and ruptures. Now then, one key vulnerability to our people, some might emphasize, particularly Northern European, but in all of us really, is our evolved penchant for objectivism to take on what Clerk Maxwell called Augustinian devils, challenges of nature, as our problems were a bit more the challenges of nature than peoples from the Middle East, where the challenge was a bit more from other people. Thus, the YKW evolved a penchant or capacity for what Clerk Maxwell called Manichaean devils or trickster devils, which can change the rules of the challenge, as in the Mossad's wage war by deception, or the Muslim taqiyya. For the YKW part, I diagnosed what I call red caping. The YKW are experts in how to maintain their group organization against challenges and how to rupture the group organization of others. With that expertise, they are largely responsible, in my working hypothesis, for drastically representing, red caping, what postmodernity is supposed to do, largely explicated, as you recall, by my profs at UMass, but falling short of taking on the racial and YKW issue to its necessary extent, of course. Thus, while postmodernity and its hermeneutic turn was conceived to sustain group homeostasis of inherited forms against the ravages of modernity, its universalizing impervious Cartesianism, running roughshod over native species, inherited forms, while retaining the good and benign of modernity, and against the antagonisms of hostile ethnocentrism, backward traditions, while retaining the good and benign of tradition. It, postmodernity, has been red-caped. Red caping of postmodernity in the hands of YKW is taking a good and even necessary concept for maintaining group homeostasis and distorting it beyond its anti-Cartesian purpose and making it absurd or even explicitly weaponizing it against whites, so that you have whites chasing not just the red cape, but the underlying concept even. A great example would be the red caping of a moral order by Christianity, so that they not only, reactionaries not only will chase away the red cape, but the need for a moral order at all will be written off as enemy propaganda rhetoric. Red caping of postmodernity, coming back to that. With that, I take Wittgenstein's concept of depth grammar to diagnose the essence of the left as a matter of unionization and coalitions thereupon. This unionization would be consonant with Plato's means for organizing the broader populace to offset the might makes right. That's just the way it is, by God, by nature, by my superior claims of the exploitative and traitorous elites. Marx red-caped the left by making it about a union of workers of the world international, culminating in their control of production and the withering away of the state. The Frankfurt School, infamously afraid and frustrated by the white middle class, devised cultural Marxism, that is, unions of non-whites and anti-whites in coalitions against whites, straight men especially. Though through academia, they have deployed red caping of an array of well-meant and well-conceived postmodern resource to distortion and abuse beyond the anti-Cartesian and reconstructive mandate markedly of hermeneutics and social constructionism, and weaponized it as such to where white reactionaries chase the red capes and with it attack the underlying concept that is necessary for their well-being and their group homeostasis. As this weaponization and this liberalization of our borders is what the liberal leftists do, whereas we are all about truth, pure facts, God, and nature. Note that the YKW have always referred to any kind of white identity as right-wing or far right. That's not new. They want white identity associated with reactionary low-account objectivism that can infiltrate and manipulate its low-account rigidity, as they have done, for example, with the Assad battalion not the Assad. What is it? The ASAR? EFAR? The neo-Nazi battalions in Ukraine. But anyway, but that became particularly useful. That is to force whites to identify where they have identity as whites, to call it right wing, particularly useful to the YKW around 2008, when the magic hand of their Austrian school economics began to show in one more bust of the boom-bust cycle, when their false oppositions, the neocons and the cultural Marxists coalitions, began to intersect against and blow back against the greater hegemony than ever of the YKW. Of course, the plain leftists, or the international leftists, have always been anti-nationalist leftists, have always been hostile to a concern to Zionists. So they notably Gottfried and David Horowitz, began retooling the false opposition, revamping the false opposition known as paleoconservatism, which is a fusion of Enlightenment and Judeo-Christian values, as the quote alt-right, a big tent of groups sharing the common denominator of antisocial stigma. Now more generally known as the dissident right, and engaging in a marketing program of characterology of the quote left, whereupon they get whites to argue against their red capes of postmodern concepts and to try to solve modern concepts that have been weaponized against them by doubling down in modernist response, or finding ways to hang on to the security blankets of their reactions by introducing these vulnerabilities with third positionism. Diagnosing all this correctly, as I believe that I have, and trying to talk about it, is a good way to be very unpopular, as I have found, not just with the YKW, but also with Christians, Nazis, and other scientific reactionaries. Most recently, Josh Neal politely declined to talk with me anymore. It's like, never mind, whatever. His psychology take is quite limited as in its use as a unit of analysis anyway. Sorry, Josh. Whether encouraging or encouraged to white knuckle purity spiral beyond the accountability and correctivity of structured praxis, enlisting pragmatism's gift, as Hillary Putnam put it, whereupon fallibilism does not yield to skepticism, but necessitates participation in correctivity, and I add, by unionization and coalition building thereupon. Now, going back to my time with you, to my friend back in Massachusetts, you told me, and quite correctly, that my worldview was pretty much anathema to the American way. That is true, and I was a fairly lone voice in the wilderness in criticizing America's foundational ideas around 2010 still. Not anymore. Now even the most conservative people are beginning to cast aspersions on America's founding ideas, which, if you're going to be a conservative, you're conserving liberalism, really. But they're not getting proper diagnosis and prescription out of the problem. They are buying into the marketing campaign that the problem is this red cape characterology of the quote left, which does not deal with the reality, they say, whereas we hold on, I'm confused about my writing a little bit here. Whereas we advocate whereas the left advocates, whereas we are against equality and hate social justice. That's pretty stupid. We supposedly hate diversity and multiculturalism, don't we? We are about truth, pure facts, pure nature, and God. Feeling that about Hitler to solve the JQ with its by Hitler's natural phallistic program. That's all you need, according to the reactionaries. who buy into this marketing campaign against the characterology of the left. Whereas the first kind of right-wing reaction serves argumentation for the YKW elitism quite well at this point. That's why they encourage it and get whites into that mode where they are low on accountability to our people. The second reaction, Hitlerism, is useful to the YKW because it is radioactive to white organization. It is divide and conquer of whites. For their cynical inner circle, it calls the traitorous diaspora those mixing with other races, much like I did not mind OJ offing Nicole. And finally, there's going to be a jaded Zionist core, which may not really care if diaspora who are mixing with others and integrating with others are killed off by the Nazis, with the Nazi reactionaries. It stifles white union, but it stifles white unionization. It also stifles white unionization and coalition building. This Nazi association does, for it's being a general turnoff to most. Thus, they will deal with it, even promote it in false opposition. That kind of rigidity is what they're doing with. I believe it's a large part of what they're doing with the Azov Battalion in Ukraine, who do have a Nazistic element, unfortunately. Now, I support their nationalism. I don't necessarily. I don't support their Nazism, and I don't support unnecessary militarism. We'll get to that in a minute. We're going to come back to Ukraine in pretty short order. Coming back to the American way and those boomers who have flourished and enriched themselves in the post-war era, it would be hard for them to not be overly self-flattering for their accomplishments as individuals, having done it by their own bootstraps. I know that you don't do this, recognizing crucial help along the way, but minimal social accountability is a vulnerability built into the American way with Jefferson's Lockean concept of civil rights. Locke exemplified the empirical side of Cartesianism. His concept of civil individual rights dovetailed with his idea that all individuals have the same perceptions, therefore their rights should be sacrosanct over the concept of groups, which were an empirical fiction and could be oppressive when imagined, as he found the British aristocracy to be against middle-class educational aspirations. While not exactly true, there are empirical patterns which can legitimately be classified. The idea of the Enlightenment that Kant tried and failed, still Cartesian, not having the proper postmodern ideas to rescue from the low account arbitrary immorality, was written into the American way by Jefferson and certainly has its liberal appeal: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness through civil individual rights, not to be obstructed by the fallacy of group classifications. This had problems, but was so bad for most whites. This had problems, but was not so bad for most whites while America was still 90% white prior to Emmanuel Sellers' Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965. And the YKW weaponization of civil rights in the 1964 Act, which Saul Alinsky style made whites, and pretty much whites only, live up to their Lockean rule of civil individual rights over group classification and discrimination thereupon. The prerogative and prohibition of white group classificatory discrimination. In the years following, the Cartesian Trotskyist notion of anti-racism took the idea of purity spiraling, anti-classification, prohibition of white classifying, and discrimination thereupon mandate radically further. Let me try to finally round this out here, not having time for a short letter, as Jefferson said. The red caping of the left is meant to misdirect whites from the underlying depth grammar of unionization by which their elitist power and the power of complicit white traitorous elitists, whether right-wing or plain liberal, could be challenged. They want to portray the left as meaning, and only meaning, the Marxist international and anti-national left of the cultural Marxists, anti-white left. Its assailing of white borders and bounds and red cape distortions and weaponizations against whites, which red capes whites into thinking that the left and liberalism are one and the same, when in fact that is an oxymoron. Our union, by definition, conserves what is within against liberalization, or scabbing, as it were, of its borders and bounds. We are, of course, not talking about unionization of a kind of work, but of a people, European peoples, and forming coalitions along with that, with its accountability, opposed to supremacism, exploitation, killing, and genocide. It has structural basis to coordinate with other non-white peoples. An excellent aspect of the union metaphor is that it can facilitate the kind of incentives for participation that skeptics of white European unity may claim is not possible. There was some herding cats kind of thing. And it can accommodate different ideals while not requiring what is probably an impossible project indeed of restructuring European psychology and skill set entirely on time. No, it is a vastly more simple and practical project. How do I tie this back to the war? Let's see what we have here. How are we doing? Okay. We're doing good in our chat. How do I tie this back to the war then? This platform that I've cultivated makes good sense of that, as with just about any social group, social interaction that is going on. You have the neocons, such as Victoria Nuland and her husband, Robert Kagan, author of one of the authors of Project for a New American Century, to secure the realm around Israel to use American military, commandeering Ukrainian nationalism and enlisting right-wingers to take the payoff. Whether Biden's son, the notorious Hunter, Kerry's son, Pelosi's kid, Romney's kid, or literal Ukrainian Nazis from the West antagonizing with their, who they entice with their liberalizing and instigate with their liberalizing and neoliberalizing underpinnings, the underlying nationalism of Russia. They antagonize it, which in turn is not well articulated, but rather functioning as a reactionary imperialist kleptocracy, with Putin under the tutelage and in necessary cooperation for his ideology with the YKW of his own misguided accord. Even if you're talking Marxism, the Marxism of his background. But he has, of course, oligarch ties, grew up friends, and still has kosher friends who are from childhood, who are important money ties, and he's in cahoots with Shabbat Lubavitch, and of course he has arrangements with Israel. Okay, that said, here's where I come to the important matter at this point. At least it is my belief. Zelensky is, of course, the president of Ukraine is, of course, YKW, he's kosher, thus bespeaking PNAC, the Project for a New American Century's agenda of installing Israeli-friendly regimes. He's PNAC realized, and Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, is apparently kosher as well. I do think that matters, but it also makes me doubt very much that they're really well enough connected to the true interests of the Ukrainian people. and that their call for war is catastrophic. I'll elaborate in a minute. His calls, which continue, last I checked, to fight to the last, should not have been heeded. It will create more and more destruction and death, which may escalate beyond Ukraine cataclysmically. That is not to say that the Ukrainians should not fight for their ethno-nation. I have been moved nearly to tears by their fight and the worldwide support for their ethno-nationalism. Such a relief to see this spirit so different, so good as compared to neoliberalism, and those ardent nationalists who would fight of their own accord and are willing to die should not be fought against, but a position rather should be taken to Putin that this is what happens. We don't recommend this approach, but this is what's going to happen among some of our people when you do what you have done. However, losses should have been and should be still minimized by allowing Putin to install his puppet. This will hardly be a clear victory as opposed to what Coach Red Pill is saying. He's like all about apologizing, all about defending Russia's reason for doing this. It's ridiculous. It will hardly be a clear victory as the stooge that Putin would install will be obvious and hated. And the long-term project to retake Ukrainian ethno-nationalism will begin with worldwide support and, critically, inter mariam, Pilsudski's idea of a coalition of East European nations to buffer against Eastern and Western imperialism. In that regard, I have to say a few words about Elena Simonyanka. Anyway, I also base this opinion on my experience. I also base this opinion on my experience in Belarus, where I've been many times, even met a couple times with Shushkevich, the first president of Belarus upon its dissolution, who wrote the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And while Shushkevich, a true Belarusian patriot, was president of Belarus after the fall of communism, Mother Russia ousted him in favor of the puppet Lukashenko. Now, that's bad. Russians are only about 11% of the population of Belarus, and the official language has reverted back to Russian. Further integration is threatened with Russia by means of the neo-Soviet enculturated Lukashenko. I have met men who were beaten for hours for protesting Lukashenko's staged elections or for trying to operate a dissident press. Lukashenko has murdered at least 10, maybe 25 opponents. You can go to brutal jails for fairly trivial offenses, 7 years for possession of a marijuana joint, for example. And all that said, the Belarusians survive as a people, with what is in many ways a very pleasant atmosphere, with all modern amenities, including fancy bars and restaurants on the main avenue in Minsk, which used to be named after Belarusian hero Skarina, while that and adjacent streets feature names and statues of Soviet monsters like Felix Dzerzhinsky. Still, the people endure and do not suffer too badly if they do not raise objections too loudly, but rather live to fight another day, which one wonders about if native human species in the West will survive, quite frankly, live to fight for their species, for their homeostasis, against the forces of neoliberalism, which are taken for granted as the best thing in the world by the likes of Stephen Kotkin, Princeton's Stephen Kotkin, by Yale's Timothy Snyder, and who's the other one that I was citing the other day? Oh, and Mearsheimer. Thus, in contrast to my knee-jerk agreement with a sign held up by a Ukrainian woman, which read, "If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine," I disagree strongly and think it is a disastrous position at this point. I don't mean to stop. I don't mean to stop fighting exactly, but in a more indirect way, not even rising to what would be called full-fledged guerrilla war at this point, or not even a full-fledged, but rather a fight over the long haul with less destruction, fewer casualties, less chance for escalation, including a reaction to the other great threat to our European genome, which is neoliberalism, being posed as a, quote, solution to all this ethno-nationalist warring. Okay, I'm almost finished. One more paragraph. So what I wanted to say is that this platform that I've cultivated, which I call left ethno-nationalism, to turn off the right people and distinguish it clearly, contrary to the kosher marketing characterology of the left that all right-wing reactionaries are buying into, is not against facts, it's not against truth. It's not hell-bent for equality, you know. And it has rather respect for incommensurability of niche participation in human ecology. It does not identify with objectivity beyond a relative group interests, whether unaccountably above or below praxis, but rather takes objective truth inquiries as feedback, crucial feedback to be gauged against the basic worldview of our relative interests in genus and species as calibrated in a union of unions to serve in structuring accountability, correctivity, and thus homeostasis of our relative interests and homeostasis of other human species, thereby in coordination and coalition with other left ethno-nationalisms of non-imperialist, non-supremacist goodwill in function of human and pervasive ecology. Then I make one more wry remark about how it's been said that war is, let's call it a kosher harvest, and well, you know, it's that might be a kind of nasty thing to say, but seeing what Zelensky is calling for, yeah. As for Poland taking on refugees, I am proud and moved, particularly given the horrible history with Western Ukraine, where the Banderas, Ukrainian Nazis, murdered whole Polish villages, men, women, and children, prior to the end of World War II, so the Poles wouldn't get any ideas about taking Lvov, a city which the Poles had largely built, had a large part building, back for themselves along with surrounding areas. So I think it's great that Poland is showing Poland and Poles are showing so much goodwill to the Ukrainian refugees. Wanted to say a few more words about Coach Red Pill. I'm Earth Baron. Coach Red Pill, for some reason, keeps defending the Russian invasion by Putin. He cites that claims that that America was helping Ukrainians to develop bio weaponry. um, and that he, along with several other parties, are saying that, and maybe even true, that America has been sending support, military weaponry, not only to Ukraine broadly, but knowing that the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazis, are going to get some of this support, and that they've trained the Azovs, even in some cases directly. Now, I have, of course, great reservations about the neo-Nazi contingent among Ukraine. But when Coach Red Pill is saying that these guys are, he literally said that they are invading. Well, how do you invade your own country? Last we checked, these eastern provinces of Ukraine were still part of Ukraine, even if largely populated by Russians and Russian speakers. But Coach Red Pill's justifications, even if Ukraine has biological weapons, even if Ukraine has high-tech weapons from the United States, even if Ukraine has some people with a neo-Nazi mindset, even if Ukraine has nuclear weapons, it rests on the assumption that Ukraine has reason and is likely to deploy that weaponry against Russia, which is simply not true. I mean, they would know, like all similarly armed nations, that they would get clobbered if they tried any such thing. And further, there's not the motivation isn't there. Yeah, there's some people there are some very anti-Russian elements in Ukraine, no doubt, but it's mainly on the basis, for the fact that Russia's been oppressing them and has a history of oppressing, and they want to wrest further autonomy, in essence. So that does not validate the invasion of Putin doing this to Ukraine. Even the strategic reasons of having a warm water port and the natural resources that Ukraine has does not justify, of course, Putin's war against Ukraine. It simply doesn't. He can and should find ways to work with the Ukrainians to establish the use of the warm water port and negotiate trade for these resources that he needs from Ukraine. If the danger to Ukrainian people, to Russian people, comes from this coalition that I'm talking about, but this coalition between kosher interests who don't care about Ukrainians that much and don't care about Russians that much, right? So on both sides. That's where the great danger is coming from, and that's what's that's what's triggering this war, this absurd war, which, again, um, what should have happened early on is, what would have been good to happen early on is Zelensky stepping down, rather than calling for, an escalating hot war with Russia that's leading to such vast destruction. Zelensky should have played a little rope-a-dope. Step down. Let Putin install his puppet in Ukraine like he's installed in Belarus. Now, okay, that's what's the thing to do at this point. Long ago there might have been it would have been the thing to do to try to install a more genuinely Ukrainian ethno-nationalist president, of course. But that didn't happen. You have a kosher president, of course, and who's is trying to drag the whole world into this war, and a war, and exploiting the rigidities of these Ukrainian right wingers. That's going to get, just a lot of their people and their cities destroyed, and perhaps drag the world and themselves destroyed. Whereas they could live to fight the long fight. I'm not saying that, act as pacifists, but fight in a different way. And again, you're gonna have any president that Putin would install is gonna be hated. Is gonna be a mockery, and you're gonna have a clear path to retake genuine Ukrainian ethno-nationalism without such vast destruction. You'll be able to exercise your manly defiance enough on that path, but not making cannon fodder of yourself. Okay. So I will I'll put the link in if anybody wants to talk. Here it comes. Hi, Bernard Brightson. I don't place Bernard Brightson. I don't even know. He seems to think of himself as a good guy in relation to me. I don't know if he. I hate to say it, but I don't know if he is or not. But I'll assume he's a good guy. I think he is. I know Mirth Baron pretty well, but at this point, I know where he's coming from. Amanda, I know. Very nice lady. She respects the concept of ethno-nationalism, and doesn't mind Europeans thinking that their nation should be for their people. And she also recognizes the peril of having to live with some people that you might not want to live with for good reason, even though those good reasons are not acknowledged by the powers that be. There's the link if anybody would like to join. I think this is a good time for podcasting, don't you? It is. I started at 8 o'clock, which is 7 o'clock UK, just 2 o'clock in the afternoon, New York time. It's 1 o'clock in Chicago. 12 o'clock in Denver, and 11 o'clock in Los Angeles and San Francisco. By now, an hour ahead. We've been at this for an hour now. I've been one part of the. I can't say that I've been following this Ukrainian situation closely for a long time. Maybe I should have, but that's just, day-to-day politics are not what I do. But what a lot of the Russian apologists, many of the right-wingers are gravitating towards that angle, are saying is that this Nazi contingent, the Azov Battalion, isn't being given a lot of coverage for its antagonism and its warring on the Russian inhabitants in the East, and its kind of oppression of their bringing the Russian culture to Ukraine. Like, it's their denouncing of or sort of attempts to suppress Russian language. I have some not with war in the East, but I have some familiarity with this mindset from my experience, my times visiting Lvov, the western Ukrainian city, where I've been several times, even not that long ago. And even had dinner at a restaurant, which is basically dedicated in commemoration of Bandera, the neo-Nazi Ukrainian whose towns were responsible for murdering whole villages of Polish people, men, women, and children. So his being celebrated is, it's first of all weird to me, but okay, you want your nation, but I would not celebrate this guy if I were a Ukrainian nationalist, even. And in fact, apparently, there's a major street in Kiev is named after him, leading up to where the Babi Yar event was. So what I'm saying is that my feelings are a little bit complicated, when it comes to Ukrainian nationalism, where it gets mixed up with that stuff, that Nazi stuff. But I guess it has to be sorted out the same way that I try to sort it out with American white nationalists, by talking about the epistemological blunder of it, and proceed in that way. Try to tease it apart, because I've listened to one of their spokesperson, Elena Semeniaka, who has spoken with Greg Johnson's Countercurrents, Shorty Midyard, And she seems to be of goodwill, that she could be, that she might consider this teasing apart, because she talks in terms of wanting to facilitate the intermarium, what Joseph Pilsudski called the intermarium, which was a buffering coalition of the nations between Russia and Germany, to buffer against imperialism from the West or the East. And that's a darn good idea. The danger is most neoliberalism, though, from the West, of course. What's kosher background, and surprisingly, we see that it's necessary against Russia. I'd say surprising. Who the hell thought that Russia was going to do this? Sick. Yeah, Baltic to Black Sea again. Yeah, that would be good. So, I'm with her. I would like to see this coalition. Who's supposed to be in it? It's supposed to have Ukraine. She wants to have Ukraine. Fine. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, Czech, maybe even Austria, Hungary, and Finland, I guess. I'd love to include Belarus too. Now I don't know if I don't know what the other than it's being the east of Ukraine being just what's been part of Ukraine historically. In terms of its strategic and resource value, I wonder if it's really worth fighting over. Apparently, some see it as such, or if it just could be just relinquished, those two areas to Russia. Unfortunate as that, and unfair as that would be, I think. So I'm trying to consider this in terms that wouldn't provoke a war with Russia, but yeah, I would like to see this intermarium concept, because, particularly when it's coming from the mindset of someone like her, you are not talking about someone who's going to fall into the trap of being so against Russian Federation chauvinism, its imperialist kleptocracy, that you would then relinquish ethno-nationalism and let it fall prey to the neoliberalism of Joel Kotkin, Mersheimer, or even Timothy Snyder. Okay. And, together these nations that coalition could be pretty powerful. Again, I wouldn't mind adding Belarus to it. I know that, Belarusian nationalists are true. Belarusian nationalists are very strongly well, let me say, I could say they're strongly anti-Russian, really, wanting their sovereignty. That's what it's about. And again, the reason why you haven't heard, where you barely know where Belarus is, that they're any different from Russia, is because Russia has been so successful historically in their quelling of Belarusian nationalists and suppression of their difference as a distinct people and a genetic people. Now, again, coming to these distinctions, again, that's interesting. I was talking about this last time. I was discussing Timothy Snyder, the Yale historian who focuses on largely on Eastern Europe, as the bloodlands between Germany and Russia. He says quite incisively, clearly an intelligent man, that Putin denying the national difference and distinction of the Ukrainians is the rhetoric that goes into imperialism and genocide. He put himself, though, with that, he really put himself into, he painted himself into a corner. He put himself, because then you look at him and say, aha, Mr. Snyder, so are you going to deny that the white race exists? Are you going to deny white nationalism is valid? Which is really, of course, just the tag for Europeans in diaspora, because it would be ridiculous to call European people who live in the Americas or Australia or elsewhere, to call them Europeans. So you call them white. That's all. It just means European in diaspora. Anybody who wants to make a big deal out of that is just being ridiculous. My back is in an awkward position. So he's and when he talks about what he calls what he's saying, that ethno-nationalism, so European ethno-nationalism, he is about language. It's the only person that I've ever heard say that ethno-nationalism was about language and not about genetics. I guess that's what he had to say in order to try to finagle his way out of of what he was implicating by what he's saying, denying the racial distinctions of European peoples, genus and species, in Europe and in diaspora as white people, as he is party to, is preparation for genocide. Okay, so I'm making myself very unpopular. Josh Neal has his Christian friends and his maybe Jewish friends and his Nazi friends that he's got to cater to. Okay, fine. Even if people don't listen to this in the live stream, they can come back to it. I'll leave it up. Let's see how unpopular we can be. First, though, I want to look at some people that I can kind of recommend as that I might criticize. 142 are watching the Woman's Hour. Oh, that should be interesting. Ugh. But they're pretty. Academic agents, crew of women. They're cute ladies. I tried listening to them. Oh man, it's boring. Really bad. Talking about basket weaving and home birthing or something. It's important, well, the home birthing is to talk about that kind of stuff. Sorry. Where's my history? Uh-huh. This one, Olga Reznikova, Ukrainian woman. I really like her take on things. The Russian guy, NFKRZ, who sometimes does videos with Bald and Bankrupt, I kind of enjoy his take on things. I like Coach Red Pill less and less. Never liked him to begin with, but I like him even less now. Although he does cover some specifics very well in terms of articulating some things that you might not hear otherwise from mainstream media. I don't like his take, though. I don't. As I said, I don't buy it. That he said if he was Putin, he would have done the same thing, pretty much, and that's just ridiculous. Putin is not justified in what he's doing. Not. There was no clear and imminent danger. And it was not, and certainly not coming from the Ukrainian populace, such that this attack on them would be at all justified. Absolutely disgusting what Putin is doing. And again, he was, yes, he was, there were instigating factors. As I said, yes, Victoria Nuland and, the neocons and the complicit right-wingers who are taking the big money from the gas industry in Ukraine. Each side trying to set their stooges as presidents, whether it's Yushchenko from the Russian side or Poroshenko from the Western side. Now Zelensky from the neocons. Now, I have to be careful about what I speak because that contingent can kind of be a threat to Russia, because just as they're less concerned really with the actual native Ukrainians, Zelensky, that is, so too they would be less concerned with actual Russians. But I just don't see them attacking Russia because their friends are on that side too. I really, it's not, Putin's a little crazy. Yes, I mean, there's rationale there, but not rationale that a normal person wouldn't try to figure out in a way that doesn't require this kind of war. It's totally absurd. But the important thing for us now, for we, the well-intentioned people, the true ethno-nationalists, the non-supremacists, non-imperialists, the left ethno-nationalists, that is to say, what we need to do in our unions and our coalitions is to take the position that to draw back from the hot war and to recognize that if Putin installs a puppet regime in Ukraine at this point, it is not what Coach Red Pill would claim as, a victory, a clear victory. It's, only in a very absurd sense is this a victory. It's and in the long haul, the avenue is made clear for the Ukrainian fight and path to true victory, which is their autonomy, the homeostasis of the Ukrainian people, such that they're able to control their borders and boundaries. Eva Mason says, finally agree, Daniel. Who's Eva Mason? You agree with me? Well, you could here. I'll put in the link again. Coach is still hunted by Ukrainian special forces. Well, he's said things. If I were a Ukrainian nationalist, I would find this guy extremely obnoxious. I don't know if he should be persecuted, but I would take him and smack him around and get him the fuck out of the country and just they don't ever come back. You piece of shit. Now that's again, it's valid to criticize the neo-Nazi contingent in Ukraine, and again, it's a problem. There is that. But it doesn't justify this war, because for them to have aggressive aspirations against Russia makes no sense. And Coach Red Pill literally said, and they were invading the eastern province. How do you invade your own country? You don't. So let's not, even though it might not go this way, the war might escalate. The Ukrainians might be instigated to, just keep up the hot war indefinitely. They might even, come to a kind of victory that way, in the sense of forcing Putin to back off in the sense of not installing uh, quite a puppet regime. Yeah, I don't see that actually. But let's say even if they did, even if they do win by this means uh, of engaging in hot war, there's so much more destruction and death, and so much more danger for not only Ukraine, for the world around, by pursuing the fight in this manner, that it isn't worth it. Whereas taking a step back and fight, and playing a little possum, allowing Putin to set up his puppet regime for a time, is going to be it's going to achieve the same result in the long run with less death and destruction. Now, let's see what this is. Eva Mason, are you a troll? Apparently, yes. Okay.
Good mountain. How you doing, Daniel?
Who are you? Are you Conops?
Maybe not. Why do you have a band, man? I'm a band in your chat.
Yes, that was Conops. Conops is never going to be a sympathetic party. I'm afraid he's committed to showing off to his perceived audience of how liberal he can be, and how white knighting he can be of the slut entourage. I'm supposed to be jealous of his girlfriend. The question is, who has performed fellatio on more men, Conop's girlfriend or Millennial Woes? Well, there, I said it. I did it. Now Josh Deal will certainly never talk to me again. Well, maybe Josh can get a blowjob from Millennial Woes. Jeez. Right wingers. Who's based liberal supposed to be? This is going to be another troll. Let's see. Based liberal, who are you?
Come on, I can't say anything back.
What?
I can't say anything back.
No. You can't. I gave you enough of a try. Similar with Claire Call. There's no point to it. You're just trying to get under my skin and troll me and just assuming that I don't have a valid platform and that I want to talk to people who want to elaborate, not on these ideas, not people who want to dispute and try to transform what I'm saying into some whatever they want to do, liberalism or what have you. I've been careful about it, so this is not the place for radical debate, blood sports, Jerry Springer. We're not doing that here. I'm all for careful critique and respectful critique where it might be, but it unfortunately hasn't been my experience that, or there's been a short supply of it. And it is unfortunate because that's the way it's supposed to work. That's what correctivity is all about, is feedback and participation and interaction, which the internet and these kind of live streams afford in a way that was completely cut off in days before the internet. It was horrible. You just had TV, you know, the televid's telling you what it's all about. Scared. This one named Scared Daniel No is trying to get on. Well, why should I talk to you if you're going to try to troll me? I'm not scared. I just don't. I don't want to waste my time. My platform has a solid moral basis, and I don't need, and I have a solid moral grounding. I don't need. I don't need that kind of radical testing, as it were. Where's Amanda, or what's her name? Some of our other lovely lady friends. Now this what's her name? Zedez, who was really upset with me for posting pictures of, naked and partly naked ladies on my Twitter. She said that she wanted to talk to me. Well, I would talk to her. I'm here. I think the reason why she doesn't want to talk is because that she wouldn't be able to. Her concept of me wouldn't hold up. And she sort of needs that psychologically, a bogeyman man. Yeah, as I said, I'm satisfied with the platform that I've set out here. I'm satisfied. It's the best platform and the best outlook for defense and reconstruction of our people, homeostasis. Now, not where, of course, I'm lacking is in marketing and interpersonal skills a bit. I can be triggered. I can be triggered by not just the liberals, but by the Nazis and the Christians when they're abusive of me, even. So maybe I shouldn't refer to Todd Lewis as Turd Lewis. He's a nice guy. But when you've been hassled as much as I have by the Christians, people like Matt Parrott and so on, by the Nazis, that I'm not scared, Eva Mason. When you've been hassled as much as I have, I lose patience, and my vitriol will come forth. Maybe that's part of what Josh Neal is doing when he declines the invitation to discuss the DNA nations. But it's no excuse, really. Even I guess the most legitimate critique of me in my position is that there could be people who are with better capacity, but what I'm finding is that better capacity, of that in some part expresses itself in a a Keith Woods or a Joel Davis. That mostly what it does is allow them to be dishonest, and to rationalize things that shouldn't be rationalized, really, which is the way you get ahead in this profoundly disordered late modernist situation, the wake of its destruction. And such that Piggers has let on Conops on mediating for no, not going to let on Conop, not going to let on Claire either. Sorry. I'd let on Pigger yourself, but not those two. Now what's happening is that they're intelligent enough, and I had experience with a couple people like that at Majority Rights too, with Bowery and Guest Worker. They're intelligent enough, in essence, in the end, to be really stupid in some fundamental ways, because they can kind of patch up their antiquated technology, their Cartesian roadwork, and make it work, even though, to some extent, even though it shouldn't. Or the people like what's his name with his Christianity, this cohort of Josh Neal. Oh gosh, I just had his name. His name is just a second. I'll tell you. The hamster is his handle. That guy. How you or Matt Power? How do you make crazy and convoluted nonsense like Christianity work in this context? You've got to be very clever if you're going to, either very clever or very stupid to believe it. You're very clever to try to massage that nonsense. In other words, smart enough to be really stupid is what I'm saying. And conversely, I guess I could be criticized, and this would be the best, maybe the best criticism that a Josh Neal would have, or a Kevin McDonald would have, and not talking, and not wanting to deal with it, is that I'm not clever enough to be that stupid. It's like, and that's why I can't, for things to work for me, they have to be really soundly considered, and now that could be a liability in the quote normal liberal world, where it helps to be able to be a bit more dishonest than I'm capable of being. Okay, so in war games where you have to be deceptive, maybe, or you have to be able to exercise precision logic, like someone operating a fighter plane, a fighter jet. But I don't really think that that's a legitimate reason for rejecting my participation. I really don't. People who are rejecting participation with me are the Nazis, the staunch Christians, the scientistic reactionaries who are kindred to the Nazis, and of course the kosher folk. um, other, some other people for other reasons, other uh, right wing, non-white ethno nationalists. Or supremacists, I should say, not ethno nationalists. I don't consider it valid because I'm not claiming to be beyond correctivity. So if you're so smart that you have something to add or a little correction to make here and there, yeah, great. But I also know that I'm good enough to have articulated a solid platform, and then Josh Neal with his dipshit psychological unit of analysis is going to intimidate me whatsoever. Now, I don't think that I'm disappointed that Kevin McDonald has not taken up the DNA Nations project. As I said, he started to, and somehow became discouraged from doing that. I doubt completely of his own accord. I think that his some Christian and other right-wing friends of his contributed to that discouraging. But even if he didn't want to take it on directly, I believe that he should have enlisted others to go along with this. There's no good reason not to. So these right wingers are a problem. The Nazis, the Christians, those who are all about including the kosher folk as perhaps others, like an Otto Pole who has his Asian wife, have their motivations. But I could provide a rebut to all of their objections, and I'm not being given the chance, and that's wrong. So far, I'm patient, and even if it's not taken up and people don't help me market the idea, so to speak, I can live with that. I've done what I needed most to do, which is to set forth this path to systemic autonomy. Now, who else have we got here? Oh, Pigger's there.
What up?
Huh?
What up, Dayo? How's it going?
Oh, that was ConOps again. Now, ConOps is set to impose evil upon our European people, and evil is not too strong a word. And it's not funny because his liberalism and neoliberalism would force us into involuntary contract, those of us who care about preserving our species, our genus and species, which would, of course, require the capacity to discriminate and to say that, no, this person is not part of our nation and cannot be. And, while we would be out of line if we were to say, no, you can't leave, we wouldn't do that. But on the other hand, if ConOps tried to criticize me as being a bad man because I would say to, for example, a woman who bred with a non-white, that she is free to do that, but she's ostracized, and she becomes part of another nation. And if she tried to impose herself, her mixed child, upon our nation without our consent, that she's forcing us into involuntary contract, which is by definition slavery. So Conops is the imperialist supremacist by definition. He is the one who is denying our agency, trying to deny our agency and our moral position, and by that denying his own moral position, he becomes a supremacist and a would-be slave master, and we have the right to defend ourselves against that attempted imposition of involuntary contract. Now then, I first cottoned on to that idea from James Bowery, but and while James Bowery has provided several gems like that, or he's been the purveyor of several gems like that. Yeah, Bowery has his sources too and his influences, and there's people who've been thinking in those terms. I even listened to T.T. Metzger, who to one of his old podcasts, he was saying that only a free man, only a slave can't discriminate. So that these ideas have been around. I just saying. But the key, of course, is to establish our unionization, first of all, the unionization of our people, so where we establish what it is that we consider our people, and the validity of the human and pervasive ecological validity, the warranted assertability, the accountability, the correctivity, the homeostasis of our European people, genus and species. I wonder if I should move over to Odyssey, and maybe I'll get a more appreciative audience. I have some people who I think are quite good. Amanda's a goodie, but maybe I'd get an audience there that's not just trying to troll me or convert me to secular Coranism like Claire Call. Or troll me into submission. Taxes, involuntary contract. Could be. I'm beginning to warm up to the idea that income tax is wrong, and taxes, that property taxes should be the means. The what's his name? Who's the guy that the Wizard of Oz was based on? He ran for president against Buchanan and lost. He wanted to put the dollar and the silver standard. Ah! You know what I'm talking about. That's another idea that Valerie was purveying. The land tax when you have holdings beyond your need for family formation. We're getting off track now, though, with that. Well, I was asked. Are taxes involuntary contract? There might be, but I'm not talking about extant national requirements and that's why I'm so happy about this idea of unionization of our people, independent. Unlike what Keith Woods and Joel Davis are saying, it would be independent of, liberated, as it were, from the bureaucracy of extant nation states. So that if we determine that, if people do not consent to, for example, income tax, we can reject that. Different economic formulations can be worked out between free enterprise and redistribution to make it as fair and balanced as possible, and as liberating to the human spirit as reasonable. Because to clarify, while I've called myself or I call this platform left ethno-nationalist, it's not against private property. It's not against free enterprise within reason, of course. It's not against people achieving a good deal of wealth. Okay. So we have more listeners now. I recommend that you folks go back to the early part of the show, because I think it's recapitulating some things that I've said before, but it's important stuff and bears recapitulating it. And then I go into some discussion of what I firmly believe should be our take on the Ukrainian war. Should have been and should still be not an escalation of conflict in accordance with Zelensky, not an escalation of hot conflict with the Russians, but rather a step back, allowing Putin to humor himself a bit, and then fighting the long war, to where in some senses it doesn't even look like fighting. Very. Although again, if some people are going to do that, you just have to say to Putin, well, look, this is what happens when you're being, the premier shithead that you are. Okay, so there you are.
Yeah, can we finally talk about Ukraine, or is that not possible?
All right, I'll give you a chance to talk about Ukraine, but I'm like I got a really quick trigger for you. This is not me. Is it ethical for him to be using other people's icons? Probably not. I think that who was it? That Greg Johnson got Conops canceled on YouTube for doing that. It's understandable. Um, you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to say about the war in Ukraine?
Well, yeah, I was actually surprised that the whole dissident rights, with an exception of a couple of people, actually went pro-Putin.
Yeah,
Really
that's surprising.
surprised.
I'm surprised too that they were so pro-Putin. I expect some of that, but not a little shadings of that, I should say. Not. Some people are really a Coach Red Pill. It's
Well, Coach Red Pill, that's hilarious. Apparently, they're hunting for him now. they're literally hunting for him because he, I don't know, like he got kicked out of his hotel because he's been seen as a Russian state asset.
He didn't even understand why people would find him so offensive. Or from my point of view, it's like it's plain. If I was a Ukrainian, I would find him offensive as well.
Well, apparently he's been featuring in the news in Russia as well as for help with their propaganda. So
there you go. Yeah, that would be a good reason, and he would help their propaganda. What are the mistakes that he's making is with just sort of this kind of literal minded concept of winning. Even if Putin follows this through and installs a puppet, is that exactly winning? I don't think so. I mean, it's a very qualified kind of winning that is going to pave the way for greater resistance and losing in the long run.
No, I agree. I think on the long term, I don't think the Ukrainians, especially people who live in the West who are non-Russian speakers, will not put up with the Russian puppet anymore. So I don't know. We're in for a very bloody war.
I hope it.
In my opinion,
it's really it's terrible the way the mainstream media is not making the same suggestion that I am. Because, well, I guess that they have the moneyed interests is what's behind that.
Well, what is your suggestion?
Well, I think that they should back off and let Putin, back off from hot war. Let Putin take out Zelensky and put in his puppet regime, because I base that on my experience in Belarus, where they have Lukashenko, this Russian puppet there. And yeah, it's bad that especially if you get on the wrong side of Lukashenko, it can be bad. But it's not so bad that it's unendurable. That life can be quite pleasant in Belarus even, and most importantly, the people and their infrastructure survives.
Well, that would be important, but Daniel, let's be realistic. I don't think a puppet of the Russian regime would be accepted by people who live in Western Ukraine. So even if this war is going to be successful, which I think it's going to be after a very, very long bloody conflict, right? Because The Ukrainians are not just going to let themselves be walked over. So this
No,
is
they're,
going
no,
to be.
they're not gonna. They're not gonna just. That's the point, though. That's part of the point. They're not going to accept it. But let Putin think they will, and it.
No, NATO needs to sit down with Russia, and we have to be realistic. We need to find some way to partition the country. This
Well,
should be done a long time ago.
I'm not against partitioning the country either, but the thing is that the claim that Russia was threatened from Ukraine, to me, is absurd. Even if there's nuclear weapons there, even if there's biological weapons there, even if there's advanced anti tank javelins there supplied by corrupt Western corporations, there's the incentive to attack Russia for the devil of it. It doesn't make sense, and I don't see justification for what Putin's doing. And so, negotiations. Well, I don't know how precious these two eastern provinces are.
They shouldn't be, and I think also what NATO did, unfortunately, is give the Ukrainians the idea that this war was winnable. It's not, even though the Ukrainians can stall the Russian advance, and it seems not to go very successfly.
That's the really bad thing.
Ultimately, the Russians will win.
That's the bad thing that's coming from the West. That they gave. They fueled this ultra nationalist, hot warring types, and Zelensky bears a great deal of blame for this. It's like, we'll fight to the last, and Klitschko. It's totally
wrong. What can you say now?
They're totally wrong.
Well, I think actually Zelensky might be prepared to sacrifice these two breakaway republics. I forgot their name, the Donetsk, and what was the other one? Well, anyway,
maybe now, but what I heard is that it's quite the opposite.
But look, but this is all.
He was calling upon the neo-Nazis to attack these people in these places.
Look, we had the same situation in Georgia, right? So I mean, it is Russian-speaking peoples against majority either Georgian or Ukrainian-speaking people, and in the long term, it's just not good to have these provinces under the rule of either Ukraine or Georgia, because it creates problems. I mean, Russia will always want to intervene on the behalf of these provinces. They're not part of NATO, so we can't do anything about it, but they become reasons for conflict. And I think we should be sensible and maybe just divide it up. East,
well, West. I agree with you, but
NATO sitting down at the table directly opposite Putin, give Putin some assurances that we're not going to expand NATO, but also make it really clear that Ukraine is going to be a neutral country, and that every time that if the Russians, for example, violate Ukraine's sovereignty, that would be a case for war. So I think we can make a deal.
Yeah, I can agree to that, and I don't. From what I know, and I have to qualify it from what I know, which is not much about the eastern provinces. I personally wouldn't care about giving them to Russia if that will placate them and make the problem go away. But I don't know at this point. I don't know if it will. It seems like I've seen well articulated or heard well articulated arguments to the fact that Ukraine has not only it has resources that Russia covets in its entirety, and it sees the strategic importance of apparently the Black Sea coast, not in its entirety, not just Crimea.
Well, impossible. But if they are going to do that, that's going to be a really long, bloody conflict. I just don't see any winners here. I don't see for Russia. I don't see a lot of winning. For Ukraine, definitely.
Yeah, no, they're
all
not,
its
what they're
people
doing
and its
now.
historical legacy is being destroyed.
Yeah, what they're doing now is a disaster for them too. I mean, it's really stupid. I think one of the reasons why everybody was surprised is because even the Ukrainians were not especially up in arms when he took Crimea. So if they didn't, you know, care about that, why would they kind of, I don't know, why would they
Well, yeah, I think for them,
why would they get into a situation where they're escalating things to catastrophe, where even other nations could get involved and this could turn into World War III? I don't know.
well, yeah, I think they
not
they
in other
might
words,
have
not
to
just
help.
not one second. Not it wasn't just surprising that the Russians attacked, but it's also the fervent, pugnacious response is also surprising of the Ukrainians.
Well, I don't think that's particularly surprising because the Russians are not
To me,
just
it is.
coming in. Well, I mean, they're not just coming in; they're really coming in, right? They have this chance of like surrounding Ukraine. They want to completely chop
Okay,
off the leadership. Of course, they're gonna
okay.
be.
But what would happen in the most extreme example if they said, oh, the leadership just surrenders? Say, okay, take over, install your thing, and
Yeah,
we're not going to fight. Would they start bombing the cities if there was no resistance? Probably not.
yeah, well, they'll take you over. Of course, you can always say, okay, just lay on your back and let yourself be fucked. But most people don't
Well,
want to do
yeah,
that.
I mean,
And they have a significant, they're very considerable problems with Russian leaders, right? I mean, what was the
I know,
guy again?
I know,
Poroshenko.
I know, but that
By the way, they
that
poison everybody, but they don't like.
that resistance and that aversion to the Russians doing that is what you would put into the long game, to retake your nation. And yes, there would be the rogue guerrilla fighter that you can't control, but by and large you would they should have gone for a long game, and not
Well,
not exactly just completely roll over, but not this.
no, yeah, you should just make it very costly for the Russian invaders, and then
Yeah,
maybe there's a way for us to make sure that there is a way that Putin can get out of this with saving face. Like you have to be careful how to escalate this, but he has to be able to get out with saying, "Okay, I got these provinces now. This is given to me, and now I've achieved something." Even, of course, knowing that he hasn't achieved much, but that he can sell to his own public. Because alternatively, I don't know. I just don't. I don't think it's worth it. All these countless of deaths, millions of refugees, architecture, historical European architecture destroyed. I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, but this also provides another argument against the coupling, the fusion of Nazism with ethno-nationalism, and why that should be that needs to be teased apart, because
Yeah,
there is legitimate antagonism coming from that contingent among
Ukrainian. Everybody calls each other Nazis. So I mean, you see how.
That's exaggerated. And
it's not. Well, yeah, it is exaggerated, but I mean, it shows you how.
But it's also exaggerated that people are doing that, making that claim. But worse than that, the big problem there is that a lot of right wingers want to say that they want to call everybody a Nazi anyway, when there are some cases where there are true believers, as you have in the Azov battalion.
Sure.
And
my point was a bit different. My point was that the reason why everybody calls each other Nazis, not even in Western Europe, but also in Eastern Europe, is because that movement is seen as so poisonous. So, people who talk about based Russia, I mean, based Russia wants to denazify Ukraine. How are you going to deal with that irony? I mean, if you're pro-Putin. I wonder how they're dealing with that irony, but well, they have to.
What do you mean? I'm not following you. The irony there. I mean, it's
You're not playing the irony.
The irony is that Zelensky is Jewish. So I mean,
no, that's not the irony. The irony is that people in the alt-right, people in these spheres are supporting Putin, right? People who are identify themselves as Nazis or close to, at least, and then you have Putin trying to denazify that. I mean, if you can handle that irony and then supporting Russia, I mean, you can, but for me, it's I think it's entertaining to watch.
It's more ironic than that. It's not just his anti-Nazi stance. I mean, it's a whole declaration prepared for the UN against any sort of racism and discrimination of the kind. Not just Nazism.
No, well, it's true, right? Because
sort of anti-Semitism. So I mean, yeah, for them to side with Putin is ridiculous.
I don't think that they want to side with everybody who is anti-Western countries, at least. Like, there's this reflective identification with anything that is not part of what is called the West. Because I think they hate the West.
The West's liberalism and neoliberalism, yeah.
Well, I was on a panel with Ralph. Do you know House of Commons?
Oh, the gay guy.
I don't know if he's gay. Is he gay? He's
I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking there's another guy, Ralph.
No, he's the Indian guy, Ralph Masilimani or something like that.
I think he is. But it doesn't matter.
No, it could be. He's a bit obsessed by it, so he might be. Anyway, so I was there on the panel, and he has like a average, 80 people watching or something. Actually, it should be a bit big, too big for me. But anyway, I was discussing this, and everybody was pro-Putin, and they say, yes, this is our fight against global homo, and I'm like, well, Poland.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Poland is not a liberal nation. Hungary even less so, right? The Czech Republic also not very much so, So I mean,
but they're liberal enough. I mean, really.
Yeah, but they're not.
Including Poland.
Yes, but they're not like. How would you say? They're not.
They're not going to have a gay storytelling hour in the schools. No.
No, they won't have it. No. So
there are gay bars, and nobody makes a thing.
Well, there are also gay bars in Russia, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't.
Yeah. So I mean, but there's also opposition, like, oh yeah, Putin against global homo. I don't think it works like that. I think these are geostrategic reasons why it comes in. But it's weird that the dissident right creates some kind of weird, strange narrative.
And there, a lot of it has to do with. The selling of the Orthodox Church as a bastion for them too. Father Raphael Johnson and even Ramus Paul is considering joining the Orthodox Church, and it's like, and then you had Matt Parrott and Matt Heimbach becoming Orthodox. That shit.
It's tragic. Also for Westerners, I mean, don't we have our own religions, Catholicism and Protestantism? If you're really traditional, you should return to those roots. But to go Orthodox, it's alien to our tradition. I mean, when did the Orthodox Church really separate from us? Was it not 1054 or something like that? And that meant that all the sort of historical developments separated from then on.
Yeah, they missed out on the Renaissance.
Yes,
attempts to protect
the Enlightenment and scientific revolution. Like everything, yeah. So it's not really us. I mean, it's an interesting civilization. They're great writers, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, but it's not our civilization, I would say.
Right.
So yeah,
right, but I do. Just to to point out, though, it's important that the Russians proper are European peoples. I mean, they're derived of Vikings and Finno-Ugric peoples, so that they're European in origin.
Yeah, you can say that for the Albanians as well. And you know, like who wants to really have like all the Albanians in their society? I don't know.
Well, you don't want to have any other people, whoever they are, even if they're very good. Too many of them in your nation. You want your nation to be well. I'm not speaking for you, obviously. You don't give a shit, but normal people I'm talking about now want.
you mean the 2% that agrees with you?
They're following the urges of their genetics to replicate themselves.
So that's a good question. So Daniel, do you believe in mainstream science, like evolution and stuff like that?
Of course.
Okay, so you believe in that we crossbred with the Neanderthals?
Well, a little bit. My profile says that I have 1.2% Neanderthal, which is a little less than average. Average is, I think, 2.1%.
Yeah, so we interbred with Neanderthals. I think that probably they think
that
now
a problem?
Like 67. Well, it's interesting. So you say like, okay, we want some kind of homogeneous community where everybody has the same DNA, but if you say that it's some kind of human instinct, so if it was, we wouldn't have had that kind of.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
And that is DNA that's really far away from us.
I said that genes, species have a trajectory to replicate themselves. Basically, these things they interplay and they interact, and there will be cases where, and situations where the move towards increased fitness would actually be outbreeding. Apparently, I'm not.
Yeah. Sometimes it is. Yeah.
But I'm not, but what I maintain is that the situation then is averse to human and pervasive ecology.
Wow.
I'm not, again, I'm not, I can't in the name of freedom, I can't prevent some people from saying, well,
I think not in the name.
I think it's I want to outbreed, but what
So let's see what's natural, right? So you say, okay, so if you want to see what people naturally are inclined to do, that is interbreed.
No. No.
Otherwise, you don't need any miscegenation laws or to keep people out.
It's natural that some will do that. It's not natural that all will. Most prefer to interbreed with a fifth cousin.
A fifth cousin?
Yeah.
Bit close, man. But isn't a fifth cousin also?
No, it's not. It's not
tribal alliances. I don't know. I don't think that's particularly healthy. Actually, you see that.
Of course, it's no. That's supposed to be the most healthy fifth cousin.
And I don't want to be shitting on Pigger in the chat, but I know he's partly Ashkenazi, and there's actually a problem. Like the Ashkenazis were way too genetically inbred. Yeah, then they got all these problems, So it is much better to breed it out.
These considerations will be taken into account with the genetic nations. And again, the situation is such that there is so much, so many mixed people now that, I would have to concede, frightening though they are for what they could do, that there would have to be some places, nations for people to go who are mixed and who want to mix.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to have to make that concession, but I would have to. But they would have to.
They have to
concede to the nations that to those nations that want to maintain particular.
Because
time.
I mean,
and if you have
the definition of mixing,
as long as you have 14,000 people, the problem of interbreeding is not
Yeah, but I'm
not
just
not acute.
interested how you want to do this like practically. So you're going to ask people who have well, a white parent and a black parent to both go to their respective nations, and then the
No, no, no,
child is
no,
going
no,
to be
no,
in the
no,
mixed
no,
race
no. You're
nation.
about to get
How is
kicked.
it going to work?
Conops, you're about to get kicked because that's not what I'm saying.
Come on, come on. It's interesting.
No, 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 come on. Because what I said is that we begin forming our nations such that that kind of person wouldn't be included to begin with. We're not operating within the bureaucratic structures that exist. We are forming independent unions that simply do not include this kind right from the start. And
Okay.
and then what, then once we make land claims and territorial claims, then maybe we could say, you can't be here. You have to live. You lose you lose your citizenship. You don't get a birth certificate for your mixed child. You don't get a marriage license, and you're out.
So
And you go wherever you can.
let's say in 100 years, huh? Let's say you're 100 years, you have your ideal state, right? So it's all white people coming together, and then all of a sudden there's a Brazilian tourist that, I don't know, gets it on with one of the white males in your society,
All right.
and they get a baby. What are you gonna do with the baby?
I just told you. I just told you. They've been
They
told.
all need to leave.
Who's they all?
Well, okay, so the guy who conceived the baby and the Brazilian tourists, so they have to go. They can't marry and stay in your country, and the child also has to go. So that is without
pretty much, yeah. There might be some cases where there might be some. What's that?
That is without a child now. So that's harsh.
No, it's not. The guy is told the choice that he's making.
I mean, you can't.
No,
No,
I would say
don't
the
know
guy.
if you know what love is.
I would say the guy has to go too. No, the guy, he can go with his this
where
woman.
can you go if the whole world was like you? Like
I just said that there's going to be places where there are mixed people, and that.
No, but he's white. He's white. Yeah, he conceived the baby.
These very liberal, tolerant places that you like would allow for whites too, I guess.
Well, I don't know if
that's their prerogative. What's the problem?
If the world looks,
you just want one rule. You want to say that European peoples can't look after themselves, which is ridiculous, Konovs.
I think they can look after themselves. But
no, you want to say that they
why
can't.
It would bother you? I don't know why
they can't. They don't have
somebody of another.
They shouldn't be able to preserve their species.
Color in your country,
just like any natural species, is trying to preserve it.
No. Natural species interbreed.
Yeah, they do. They
So look at the growler bear.
They interbreed at their own peril, but mostly they're trying to preserve them.
They're not trying to do anything. They can just
their genes are trying. The genes are indeed trying to replicate themselves.
Yeah,
what's the point, Connor? This is ridiculous. You're not even making good arguments.
You're going against science.
No, I'm not going against science. I'm not going against science at all.
Shout that all you want, and also I'm
not going against science. It's ridiculous. He's saying that the only instinct that we have is for outbreeding. That's what he's trying to say. Pretty much, there's this phenomenon of pheromones, which this is connected with being able to sniff out the degree of relation and the degree of immunosimilarity, and how you can increase your immunities, but recognizing where it's too much. That we are attracted to the smell of people who are just the right genetic distance to increase our immunosystem. So in other words, not really inbreeding and not outbreeding, which I guess from what I've heard, I'm not a scientist, would be fifth cousins. And That's natural. Konops is trying to say that I'm against science, and it's like you know, once he enters the picture, he's going to try to show off to his slut girlfriend how liberal he is. So we come back to the question: who has performed more fellatio? Konops, whose girlfriend, or who's performed fellatio on more men? Konops' girlfriend or Millennial Woes? And you know, it's hard to guess, but I would guess probably Millennial Woes is the winner. No, Konops is not a good faith actor. That's why I booted him. It's sometimes good to have a springboard of ideas. He almost brought something worthwhile to the Ukrainian war, but not much. So, unless you want to come on, Mirth Baron, I'm going to close things down in 5 minutes. But if you want to come on, you don't have to worry about Konops being here anymore. I'm certainly not going to invite Claire on. That's the point. It's natural, you know, particularly it's we can talk again soon, or you can come on now, Mirth Baron. I'm not closing up things just now, but especially depending on the circumstance, the context, which the YKW would try to rig, so it's you know, more seemingly natural to outbreed. It can go either way, as again, depending on the hermeneutics, how they direct, misdirect, redirect genetic proclivities, whether there's going to be more outbreeding or more homeostasis. Hi, Mirthler. Good to see a friendly voice here.
What a sensitive
in good faith.
What a sensitive faggot you are, man. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
You're so...
Am I so what? You're gone. Are you that desperate? Are you that desperate? Konops. Just because your evil has been called out. He sounded like I triggered Konops a little bit with his slut girlfriend that I'm supposed to be jealous of. How many guys has your girlfriend sucked off? Probably take heart. Probably not more than Millennial Woes. It's a shame that I have to deal with this kind of thing. Yeah, it's a shame. Well, it's a real shame that I'm not getting support in this DNA Nations project. It makes no real sense. None. But I'll keep at it. You know, eventually somebody has to see the what, Claire?
Hello. I thought we could talk about the ideas of Dugin. What do you think of him?
I think he's appalling, especially since I found quotes from him saying that how degenerate the Ukrainians were and that they should be genocided.
Did he really say that? I'm sure it must be an exaggeration.
He's quoted as having said that in a meeting with Greek, some kind of Greek group, and he's just, you know, he's not I don't want to talk about Dugin. He's not an ethno-nationalist. an anti-racist. He's a he believes in some sort of quasi-orthodox Eurasian imperialism, and he's just a jerk.
I don't think he believes in imperialism. I've just done a video about him, Do you want to
What's
play
that?
it?
What?
I've
What did you
just
say?
done a video about. I've actually been doing a lot of videos about him.
No, I don't want to play it.
Oh, you just
Yeah,
don't want to know
I don't know.
anything
I
that you
certainly
don't
don't want to talk about
like.
Dugan. No, I reject Dugan, and that's that's it. He plays with some good ideas that he's gleaned from Carl Schmitt and others, but the land-based empires versus the seafarers and how that makes for different, which can be interesting, but no,
Why?
Dugan doesn't cut it. No, sorry.
Who does?
Who does? I do.
Anyone else apart from you?
Oh, there's people who have a lot of good going for them, but they usually, I listen to them and they usually are found wanting on very fundamental levels. Most of these dissident right figures have some, if not several, good things to say. I'm not saying that they're entirely stupid. The problem is that their intelligence operating on flawed premises
Can
in
you
some
give an
ways
example?
makes them an even bigger problem.
Can you give an example?
Well, no. Generally, for example, when they operate with, as I've been saying, within this right wing, the left is the problem, Nordicist and Nazi scientific premises and redemptionism of that kind, or Christian premises. Somehow they're able to make sense and do things despite the if not absurdity, the outright destructiveness of these epistemological blunders.
So I thought you mentioned a few names of the people that you disapprove of.
What's that?
I thought you mentioned a few names of the thinkers that you don't quite agree with.
Well, I don't quite agree with I don't perfectly agree with any of them, but
Well, I thought you mentioned a few, so we kind of know, who you're
I've
talking about.
I've done that and been doing that. Whether it's Joel Davis and his thing for Paul Gottfried and Mearsheimer and other kosher sorts, Keith Woods and his affinity for third positionism, i.e., Nazism, or Matt Parrott, Matt Parrott and his Christianity. No, I want to just list a few before we slow down. Matt Parrott and his Christianity. Thamster, who's in cahoot with Josh Neal and his Christianity. Kevin McDonald and his what's increasing Nordicism and leaning towards Nazi sympathy. To name a few.
Okay, could we just
Greg
discuss?
Johnson and his over affiliation with Nazism and other scientific right wingism.
Right.
Okay, so
I just wanted to ask you a few questions about Keith Woods. So what does he actually propose?
I think that his third positionism would try to integrate socialism and maybe not so much capitalism, but kind of culturally conservative ideas, and basing a lot of it on Savitri Devi, I think he's into, and
That's Hinduism or something. If you could just clarify.
well, I guess she was part Hindu, but she was also really into Hitler, and that means natural fallacy.
I mean, does he want to expel Jews or something, Keith Woods?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, he certainly recognizes a problematic interface there, but he's also by the very fact that he's kind of teaming up with Joel Davis shows that he's not averse to playing their game.
What is Joel Davis's view? I mean, I know he wrote a book, but I don't think it was anything particularly big deal about it.
Well, no, it's true. Despite the fact that he's obviously very bright, I don't take his opinion seriously at this point, or in a positive sense, I don't take his opinion seriously. Well, he's moving towards a kind of ethno-nationalism, but he is not liberated from the marketing campaign, the kosher marketing campaign of the left being the so-called left being the problem. And it's not dealing with, quote, reality, with truth, with facts, with nature, and he is. I'm pretty sure that his graduate school advisor is kosher. I know that I have him. I've him on record as saying that he's, calling upon. He not only looks up to Paul Godfrey, but he tried to ask him if he could help him get funding, kosher funding. He has said that Israel is our friend, literally. So, like I said, he's operating within their framework that creates vulnerabilities for continued entryism and subversion. And his latest proposal, along with Keith Woods, as we discussed last time, was trying to make the big distinction one between not left and right, but between nationalism and liberalism. And while that's an improvement over saying that you're on the right and against the left, I've outlined, including at the beginning of this show, why that's not as good as my platform.
Right. I mean, I don't even get why they were even having that pointless debate, Joel Davis and Keith Woods, because I mean, I guess one.
Well, the debate.
They would have already rejected
No.
liberalism, right?
The debate was between Richard Spencer and Joel Davis. Joel Davis was.
I think that was imperialism and nationalism.
Yeah, imperialism. In their case, it was imperialism and nationalism, and Joel Davis came up with this what sounded very appealing argument that nationalism was to be defined by the identification of the people with their leaders and the elite, whereas imperialism was to be defined by a separation where the elitists and do not identify with the people. And that while there's some truth to that, it again provides the wiggle room for his kosher friends, because that doesn't delimit the people being ruled and their the fact that their identification would be based on their genetics. So, and also in the case of both Joel and Keith, when they just call this a nationalist versus liberal debate, the problem is that they are involving themselves with all these bureaucracies that the kosher folks and these disingenuous right wingers and liberals might want to use against the populace. Whereas my unionization concept, which would form the nation on the basis of genetics, not on the basis of extant nation state to begin with, would be freed of that bureaucratic obstruction, and therefore is superior to Keith Wood's and Joel Davis's platform.
So
Or
basically,
specific-
you're just going to exclude anybody who's not white, and you think that
no, that's not it. It's
you're going to
it's
exclude Jews.
well, they're just not included to begin with. It's not. We're they are not. They're not genetically us. So we are just about organizing on the basis of our genetics, and we are not. We have no concrete nation at this point to exclude them from, or to send them out of. It's not. So it's not a matter of us ostracizing them. They're just not included to begin with in our union. We can co-op. We're not supremacists. We're not imperialists. We're not trying to kill. We don't aim to kill anybody, or let alone genocide them or exploit them. So we can cooperate.
So what can
cooperate
a Jew
with others.
expect if you came to
We can
power?
cooperate with others. What can a Jew expect if what?
If you became dictator, what's going to happen to Jews? What are you going to do to them?
They would be considered part of the Jewish nation, and they would be expected to respect our sovereignty and our right to
what does that mean?
our autonomy.
Will they
right,
have equal rights, or will they be?
Well, no. Well, then equal right. They're in
will they have
international.
equal
In
citizenship?
an international, not in our nation. No.
Okay, so you will be expelling them, right?
Well, no. I mean, because that's like you're talking about a hypothetical situation where we would be in a place where there were no Jews anyway. Not pretty much.
I don't understand. I mean, obviously there
They
are
would not.
Jews.
They would not be. They would no. They wouldn't be. They just would not be included in the nation to begin with. We're not expelling.
Okay,
anyone.
so you don't acknowledge their existence, so they would have no right.
No, we
in your
acknowledge their
country.
existence. They're a part of a different nation.
Yep. So how what is their legal position in your nation? Are they equal citizens,
visitor.
or they will not have any rights?
What's the legal position of an Indian in who's an Indian citizen in England? They're a visitor.
Well, he would have a right to stay permanently, depending
No,
on whether
well,
he has a tourist visa or whatever.
Okay. According to the liberalism of current British law, yeah, he would have the right to petition for permanent citizenship, but not, but in where this is had, obviously we would be saying that no, you don't have the right to become part of our nation.
So they would be expelled, yes?
No, You know what,
I don't
Claire?
know what you're.
You
I mean,
keep no,
I keep trying to find out
no.
what,
You
and you
want
won't
to
give me a straight
you want
answer.
to put
So
the
if you want to
expel word.
expel them,
You want
then
to put the
say
expel
so.
word in my Claire. You want to put the expel word in my mouth
I'm
because
asking you to
you're trying to get me. You're
clarify
trying to get me into.
what
You're trying
rights
to get me into trouble.
the minority would have when you are in power. What's wrong with that?
It's not a minority. It's a visitor. They have the same. They have the rights that people have. To not be to a fair trial if they're accused of violating the law of the land. Um, to innocent until proven guilty. To not be subject to violence or physical abuse, though they should be they might be required to endure name calling and sticks and stones may break bones, but names should not be something that they could um,
Okay, so there will be no hate
bring up
speech
charges.
laws. Is that what you mean? There'll be no more hate speech laws.
Not probably not. No.
Okay, I mean that would be my position too. People will just have to man up to, you know, unflattering comments about their origins or whatever.
Right. But again, I don't. It's tricky territory because and it's controversial because um, I'm not one who believes that free speech is there's a lot of disingenuousness with regard to that topic because it's almost become pornography is free speech, Holocaust denial is free speech.
There'll be pornography, free pornography. There would be no pornography.
Well,
If you go.
I don't. Well, in your society, I don't. I'm not. I haven't sorted that one out. But the thing is that uh, I do want to say that with the Holocaust denial stuff, um, I think that it's best for all parties involved, including the people who might be trying to unburden themselves of guilt trip by denying that they not do that. And
What's that popping noise?
I don't know.
Do you hear it?
Well, that was the radiator.
The radiator.
My radiator sometimes pings.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, anyway, don't distract me for a second. The I don't know about severe penalties, but means of discouragement are probably in order that people not deny the Holocaust. I can, in one sense, I can see it as dangerous to as an abstract example, as dangerous to a minority population which is threatened by such sentiments behind it. If a huge majority is allowed to traffic in that kind of denial to the point of affixing it to corresponding ideology, the supremacist imperialism of Nazism, that it's it's just dangerous all around. So to say that it should, that I don't say that I don't think that speech should be merely free in the sense that it doesn't entail some sort of discouragement if you
Well, it could
are
be social discouragement. I mean, if you go around denying the Holocaust, then you're just sort of this mean person who hates Jews. Because why would you go around just denying the Holocaust? Because you must have known that Hitler, a lot of Jews died at the hands of the Nazis. So why the hell would you want to deny that? Because just because you hate them.
I guess that they want to. They think that Europeans are being overly burdened with penalized and guilt tripped, and so they think that and they might think that these that Holocaustianity is is a key to liberating European consciousness and own most innocence or something. I think it's a mistaken approach.
Well, I mean, you could just say it will be allowed. I mean, I have no problem saying Holocaust denial would be allowed in my, if I had my way with the laws. I mean,
Well, I wouldn't.
it is allowed,
I would not.
except
No,
that they've just messed it all up with their
I would not.
stupid.
I would not be. I would not be so self-righteous about it. I would have a much more. I'd have a more nuanced take on that. Again, I think some means of discouragement should be, because it is dangerous.
Well, it would be social.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to not just to Jews but to European peoples when you try to resuscitate that ideology by with redemptionism and denial. It's so.
I don't know what you mean by redemption.
I think the just like pure free speech. Oh, there's no problem. Blah blah blah. I don't, and just it could be discouraged by other people. They're just meanies, and it's a bit more serious than that. Especially this is where it's telling that you're not white, that you haven't been in the inside perspective of white nationalism, because there you can really see what a problem it is to be associated with that stuff for another thing. It's like, I want no part of it, and I don't want anybody saying that white nationalism is a part of Holocaust denial, that it approves of Hitler. These things are a disaster for white nationalism.
But you have a particular view of Jews that otherizes them, and white nationalists. I mean, it's like they can't help it. They just want to say things, mean things about Jews.
No.
It's just part of
Claire,
your genetics. Just admit it. It's part of your genetics. You hate them, and
that's enough of that. That's bullshit. It was bound to end up there. We knew that, though. Same as with Cohen Ops. I don't hate them. I recognize that there are conflicts of interests, and I'm looking to protect my people. I'm not looking to. It's not my great fun to hate on them. I avoided it for most of my life. So, unfortunately, if you're going to have an accurate assessment of the problems of going on in my working hypothesis, kosher power and influence does have to be addressed. And it's very important for someone like myself to take this critical position, because otherwise, the people who are the true believing Nazis are going to be able to say without truth that they are the only ones who are taking the issue seriously. And that's a real problem. Okay, so how much longer do we I think that we've talked enough for today. I can recommend that people go back and listen. I'm sorry that we didn't have guests today who are more friendly to me and the platform here. That should be. and you know, Josh Neal for whoever is blackballing me. You know, shame on you all. I know that I've been that I can get mean. I can get mean when people are doing neo-Nazism, when they're when they're abusing me in the name of Christianity, when they are when they're trying to kowtow to the kosher folks, and to the point where they are trying to belittle and bury me in this platform, which I know is better. I can get mean when Keith Preston is doing his thing, trying to divert from my platform. But you're just going to have to get a thicker skin, because where people are reasonable and they'll see that my platform is reasonable, and if they care about our people, they will begin to participate with me. And that's the way it should be. My conscience is clear. Okay, so we'll wrap things up, and I recommend that to anybody to go back and listen to this show from the beginning. I think it's a good one. I'll leave it up, and let's de-escalate this war in Ukraine. Let Putin try to set up his puppet regime. It will be despised and set in motion the road for the liberation of the Ukrainian people, for their sovereignty, for their ethno-national autonomy, which we can share in as European ethno-nationalists, non-supremacists, non-imperialists. Okay, so yes, we don't want white kids to come into this kind of world. We're about to do something about it. 14, and bye for now.